Welcome back. We're discussing the fate of the Goldstone report and the debate over an investigation into the conduct of Israel and Hamas during the war on Gaza. I'm joined by independent Palestinian politician Mustafa Barghouti in Ramallah, and from Dallas, Texas, Amos Guyora, a professor of law at the University of Utah and a veteran of the Israeli army. Professor Guyora, let me start with you this time. You were talking about Israel's right to self-defense, but I want to address the issue of proportionality. We have an email that came in here from Saeed Ashad, and he asks, if some people are firing missiles on Israeli citizens, is it fair to punish the whole Gaza Strip in a barbaric way? And I think that goes to the heart of whether this was collective punishment.
Right. So I would suggest looking at proportionality in the Qassam missile infrastructure in the following four ways. To make the Qassam missile infrastructure work, there are four different actors or four different categories of individuals who are involved. One, there are those who were smuggling the missiles in. Two, there were those who were making the missiles. Three, there are those who are firing the missiles. And four, there are the facilitators, those who, for instance, the land is being used for the firing of the missiles. So when we think about proportionality, when we think about responding to an infrastructure that had placed, as I said earlier, hundreds of thousands of Israelis at daily risk for over 4 years, I would suggest that in the context of proportionality in international law, those four categories are legitimate targets. The question then becomes, when are they a legitimate target, which is obviously a really important international law question. So in terms of the person who's firing the missile, he absolutely is a legitimate target when he's firing the missile. The person who is the operator, the one who's making all this happen, the person who's the brains behind this, I suggest, and according to most international law experts would agree, he too is a legitimate target, whether or not he's directly involved, because he's the one making this happen. The smuggler, I would suggest, is a legitimate target when he's engaged in the act of smuggling, and the one who's making the bombs is somewhere between the fire and the smuggler, and the person whose land is being used. I would suggest if he's doing so willingly, it can be shown based on intelligence information that he's doing so willingly.
Yeah, but I think the point being made here...
Wait, let me just finish. Wait, you asked me a question. Let me answer. This is the way it's going to work. He is a legitimate target also. And in the context of proportionality, there's one other thing that really needs to be put out there, I think, very frankly. There's an inherent disproportionality when we talk about the nation state as compared to, for instance, a non-state actor like Hamas. Obviously, the nation state has an arsenal that Hamas, thank God, doesn't have. And I'm sure Dr. Barghouti would also agree with me, thank God Hamas doesn't have, because they're also endangered by Hamas. The question is, how does the nation state use the arsenal, the weapons,
we are not
and it's available to
Hamas.
it?
We're endangered by the Israeli occupation.
I think if I recall, Dr. Barghouti, the ones who really suffered also in Gaza was the Palestinian Authority, individuals who were being shot at by Hamas. But maybe that's a discussion for another time.
But Professor Guyora, was this not... Sorry, Dr. Barghouti, I just have a question for the professor. Was this not excessive use of force? I mean, we just have to look at the casualty figures. 1,400 Palestinians killed, 13 Israelis killed.
And it's a great question. I'm delighted you asked it. It's important to recall that, again, the 4 years, hundreds of thousands of Israelis at risk, that Israel has an extraordinarily sophisticated early warning system which enables to protect the civilian population. If not for that system, which cost an enormous amount of money, the sophisticated infrastructure and so on, the number of Israeli casualties that would have occurred would have been, unknown, and who knows. And I think that that's not really the important question. The more important question from an international law perspective is how many individuals were under threat on a daily basis. And there the answer is, if you look at a 40-mile radius, because that's what Qassam missiles are, 40-mile radius, you'll see 4 years, you'll see hundreds of thousands, up to 1 million Israelis who are under danger and threat on a daily basis. That's the relevant question from the perspective of international law.
But that's not what the Goldstone Commission says. It says that Israel targeted civilian infrastructure.
Right, with respect to the Goldstone report...
Excuse me, may I please clarify a point here? Because I think you're giving all the questions to Mr. Guyora.
Go ahead.
First of all, let me see that Mr. Guyora is really approaching the matter from military technical point of view only. And in that sense, he's unable to see the human beings. And he's unable to see the human suffering of 1,400 people who have died, including 410 children, as I said. Ironically, out of the 13 Israelis killed, 6 of them were killed by the Israeli army itself. And that is a well-known fact even to him. So practically, the Israeli army did not only kill 1,400 Palestinians, it also killed 6 Israelis of its own army. And 3 civilians were killed by the rockets he was describing. So that's the proportionality. Now, the main question is, how do you compare people who don't have an army, like the population of Gaza, 1.5 million people, who have been under siege and blockade for 3 years, living in very small area, and then encountering an army which has F-16 jet fighters, have missiles of all kinds, and have tanks, and has even nuclear heads. That army used 15 F-16 jet fighters in attacking an area which is the most densely populated area in the world. In one place, about 80,000 people live in 1 square mile. That kind of use of weapons and total disproportional use of force is totally unacceptable by international law. And let me remind you here, does these suspicions that he has give the Israeli army the right to attack the targets that Mr. Goldstone has described in his report? They attacked hospitals. They destroyed 2 hospitals completely. They killed injured people inside the hospitals. They killed even ordinary citizens, sick people inside the hospitals. They attacked United Nations buildings. They attacked schools. Such barbaric kind of actions, which are described as war crimes, cannot be accepted because if Israel has the right, and that's exactly what Israel wants to do, it wants to continue this behavior of being able to kill and destroy without being accountable, neither to international law or to any other law. And let me tell you, this is awful, because in addition to these war crimes, Israel has created, after 42 years of occupation, the worst system of segregation here in the West Bank. We suffer from that. We are oppressed. Our human rights are violated. And this
right,
is
but
not
that's not, again, not part of the Goldstone report.
In the long run,
I suggest we can concentrate on the Goldstone report, because I understand time is limited.
this will destroy the future of everybody in this region.
Right, but I would suggest, you know, as a thought in terms of going forward, maybe it'd be really interesting to have a third party in this conversation, and that would be Hamas. And maybe it would be really interesting to ask Hamas, how is it that they used the hospitals as military headquarters? How is it that they were firing from schools? How is it they were engaging in human shielding?
First of all,
wait, let me finish.
Allegations that
I'm sorry.
I've been given allegations that Goldstone investigated himself.
Right, and the Goldstone report.
These allegations are not correct, sir. Let me ask.
Right,
I want you to answer me a question. Why did Hamas
I'm very sorry.
Where's
the moderator? Is there a moderator here?
Yeah, go ahead,
Israel refuses
Dr. Barghouti.
No, I mean, you're not. This is. I mean, I was in the middle of a sentence. I'm very respectfully listening to Dr. Barghouti, someone who I have great respect for, and I would think that.
Responding.
I know I was speaking, so I think, you know, there are rules to these things.
Please, go ahead.
It's documented, clearly documented, and the Palestinian Authority knows this. By the way, that's I think one of the reasons the PA goes back and forth whether or not they wanted the report to come before the UN, because the violations, clear international law violations in terms of humanitarian international law. And Dr. Barghouti is right, human rights are critical. But the human rights questions need to put fairly and squarely on the table of Hamas with respect to human shielding, the firing from the mosques, the firing from the schools, and the firing from the hospitals. And I think to deny that, to gainsay that, as Goldstone did, you know, for reasons known but to him, they're clearly documented. And it just strikes me, if we're really going to talk about human rights and international humanitarian law, we need to really point, and I think the PA on some level must also agree on this. It is ultimately Hamas that has caused an extraordinary harm to the Gazan population. I just want to put in one little tidbit. When Israel disengaged from the Gaza Strip 4 years ago, the first thing Hamas did was it absolutely and totally destroyed the economic infrastructure, the greenhouses that Israel had left for the Gazan population. So rather than go forward and build schools, develop an educational process and infrastructure enabling life to go forward,
Professor, we're going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time.
Okay.
Thanks to both of you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. Remember, you can follow the show on Facebook and see what we're up to there. You can give us your feedback on any show and post your questions and comments. On the next show, EU Foreign Policy Chief Javier Solana discusses the future of Europe under the Lisbon Treaty. Will an invigorated EU become a true rival to the United States? See you next time. Make sure to tune in for that.